The email sat in my inbox for 3 days before I opened it. I knew who it was from. The law firm's name alone told me everything had finally happened. My grandmother was dead, and apparently I was mentioned in the will. The woman who raised me until I was 8, then abandoned me completely when my parents convinced her I wasn't worth her time, had left me something. I stared at that unopened email like it might explode. My hands shook as I finally clicked it open at 2 a.m. on a Thursday, unable to sleep, unable to stop wondering what she could possibly have left me after 20 years of silence. The lawyer's words were formal and cold, named as primary beneficiary, estate valued at approximately $8.4 million, trust funds, properties, request your presence. I read it 7 times before the numbers actually meant anything. $8.4 million, to me, not to my brother Derek, the golden child who'd spent every summer at her estate in Connecticut, not to my parents, who'd borrowed money from her constantly to fund Derek's failed business ventures, to me, the granddaughter she cut off when I was still in elementary school. I closed my laptop and sat in the darkness of my apartment, my cat Mercury winding around my ankles, and I started laughing. Not happy laughter, the kind that comes when the universe reveals a joke so twisted you can't process it any other way. 20 years of being told I was the disappointment, the daughter who didn't measure up, the one who'd never amount to anything, and now this. My phone rang at 7 a.m. the next morning. I was already awake, having not slept at all, sitting at my kitchen table with cold coffee and the lawyer's email open on my screen. My mother's name flashed across my phone. We hadn't spoken in 4 months, not since she'd called to ask if I could loan Derek money for his 3rd startup idea. I'd said no. She'd called me selfish and hung up. I answered on the 4th ring. Hello. Alexis, my mother's voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear something underneath it. Panic, maybe. We need to talk about grandmother's will. Good morning to you too, Mom. I kept my voice neutral, but my heart was already racing. This isn't a joke. There's clearly been some kind of mistake with the will. The lawyer said you were listed as primary beneficiary, which is obviously wrong. Grandmother was confused at the end, you know that. We need you to contest it with us so we can get it sorted out properly. I let the silence stretch for a long moment. Why would I contest it? Because it's not right, Alexis. That money should go to the family, to Derek, who actually spent time with her, to us, who took care of her affairs, not to you. You didn't even go to her funeral. I wasn't invited to her funeral, Mom. Derek told me explicitly that grandmother didn't want me there. Well, that should tell you something about what she really wanted. My mother's voice was getting sharper. You need to do the right thing here. I took a slow breath, thinking about every single time I'd tried to do the right thing for this family. When I was 16 and gave my college savings to help with Derek's car accident expenses, only to find out later they'd bought him a new BMW instead. When I worked 2 jobs through college, while Derek got a full ride funded by our parents and grandmother. When I'd skipped meals to afford textbooks, while Derek posted Instagram photos from spring break in Cancun. I'll think about it, I said, and hung up before she could respond. The next call came 20 minutes later. Derek this time, my older brother by 3 years, the one who'd spent our entire childhood reminding me that I was adopted, I wasn't, or that I was the reason Dad's business failed. It failed when I was 2. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Lexi? He never called me Lexi. He'd called me Alex my whole life, or usually just the spare when he thought I couldn't hear. We need to talk about Graham's will. Let me guess, Mom called you. This affects the whole family. You can't seriously be considering keeping that money. Why not? It's legally mine. Because you don't deserve it. His voice shifted from fake friendly to the tone I remembered from childhood. Cold, certain. You barely knew her. I was there every summer, every holiday. I took care of her when she got sick. What did you do? You disappeared for 20 years because you were too proud to apologize for whatever you did to piss her off. I didn't do anything to piss her off, Derek. I was 8 years old when she stopped talking to me. Yeah, well, obviously you did something. Grandmother didn't just cut people off for no reason. He paused, and I could hear him breathing, trying to control his anger. Look, I'll make this simple. Sign over the inheritance to the family trust, and we'll give you a cut. Say 5%, that's fair. 5% of my own inheritance, I laughed, and it felt sharp in my throat. Wow, that's incredibly generous of you. Don't be a bitch about this. You know that money should go to someone who actually contributes to this family. I have a business to run. Mom and Dad are struggling. You're doing fine on your own. You don't need $8 million. And you do. I actually have plans for it. Real plans, not just hoarding it like you would. I thought about Derek's real plans. The restaurant that closed in 8 months, the tech startup that never launched, the the cryptocurrency investment scheme that lost our parents' retirement savings. Every single venture funded by family money, every failure blamed on bad timing or bad partners or bad luck, never on Derek. No, I said simply. What? No, I'm not signing anything over. The money is mine. Grandmother left it to me, and I'm keeping it. The silence on the other end lasted so long I thought he'd hung up. Then, you're making a huge mistake. The family won't forget this. Good, I said, and ended the call. I took the next day off work and drove to the lawyer's office in Manhattan. Howard Brennan was exactly what I expected. 60s, expensive suit, office with a view of Central Park. He stood when I entered and shook my hand with the kind of professional warmth that suggested he'd done this exact gesture 10,000 times. Ms. Chen, thank you for coming in. Please sit. The folder he slid across the desk toward me was thick. I flipped it open and started reading while he watched. Properties in Connecticut, Vermont, and Maine, stock portfolios, trust funds, detailed inventories of jewelry, art, furniture, and a letter in my grandmother's handwriting with my name on the envelope. May I held up the letter. Of course, that's for you. My hands shook as I opened it. The handwriting was shaky, but unmistakably hers. I remembered it from the birthday cards she used to send before she stopped. Alexis, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I hope you can forgive a foolish old woman for wasting 20 years. Your mother told me things about you when you were 8 years old, terrible things about you stealing, lying, hurting your brother. I believed her because I wanted to believe Derek was the golden grandchild I'd always dreamed of. I cut you off to punish you for being what she said you were. It took me until I was dying to realize she lied about everything. I found your college transcripts online 5 years ago, full scholarship, graduated summa cum laude, none of the academic struggles your mother told me about. Then I hired someone to look into your life. I know that's invasive, and I'm sorry, but I needed to know the truth. You built a career in environmental consulting. You volunteer at animal shelters. You send money to your college roommate who has medical debt, even though your mother told me you were barely scraping by yourself. Everything your mother said about you was a lie to keep me focused on Derek. I confronted her 2 years ago. She admitted she'd exaggerated some things about you to make sure Derek got the attention he needed. She said you were always so independent, so capable, that you didn't need the same support. She actually believed this, Alexis. She actually convinced herself that lying about you was somehow helping the family. I tried to reach out to you then. I wrote 7 letters. I called your office twice. You never responded, and I don't blame you. Why would you? I abandoned you when you needed me. This inheritance is not an apology. Money can't fix 20 years of rejection, but it's what I have to give. Use it however you want. Build something. Travel. Donate it all to animal shelters if that makes you happy. Just know that in the end I saw you. I saw who you really were, and I was proud. I was so impossibly proud, and I'm so sorry I didn't tell you while I could. With love and regret. Grandma Eliners. I read it 3 times before I realized I was crying. Howard Brennan pushed a box of tissues across the desk without comment. She left instructions, he said quietly, that your family not be told about her change of heart. She wanted you to have the choice of what to tell them, if anything. When did she change the will? 3 years ago. She was very specific about the terms. The inheritance goes to you, with one condition. I looked up what condition. That you don't share it with your immediate family for at least 5 years. If you do, the estate transfers to various charities she selected. She wanted you to have time to build your own life with it, without their influence. I started laughing again, that same slightly unhinged laugh from the night before. My grandmother, who I'd thought hated me, had left me everything and structured it specifically to keep my family from taking it. It was vindictive and protective at the same time, and I loved her for it so much it hurt. There's one more thing. Howard pulled out another envelope. She left video messages, for you, and one she wanted played for your family if they contested the will or harassed you about it. She was very thorough. I drove back to my apartment in a daze, my car filled with boxes of documents I'd need to review. The video files were on a USB drive in my purse, burning a hole through the leather. I didn't watch them right away. Instead, I sat on my couch with Mercury purring in my lap and tried to process what my life had just become. $8.4 million. Properties I'd never seen. A grandmother who spent her last years knowing the truth and trying to make it right. And a family who still thought I was the failure, the disappointment, the one who didn't deserve anything. My phone buzzed constantly. Mom, Derek, Mom again, a number I didn't recognize that was probably Dad. I turned it off and opened my laptop. The first video was labeled for Alexis Watch First. I plugged in the USB drive and clicked play. My grandmother appeared on screen, sitting in what I recognized as her library in Connecticut. She looked smaller than I remembered, thinner, her hair completely white now, but her eyes were the same, sharp and clear. "Hello, darling girl," her voice cracked slightly. "I don't know when you'll watch this, or if you'll even want to, but I need you to hear some things from me directly, not filtered through lawyers or letters." She folded her hands in her lap, and I saw they were shaking. "I failed you, that's the simple truth of it. Your mother came to me when you were 8 and told me you'd been stealing from Derek, lying about him to get him in trouble, acting out for attention. She said you needed tough love, that coddling you was making things worse. She suggested I distance myself to show you there were consequences for bad behavior." My grandmother's eyes filled with tears. I believed her because I'd always been closer to Derek. He was my first grandchild, and he looked so much like your grandfather. And you were always so self-sufficient, even as a little girl. You never asked for anything. You never seemed to need me the way Derek did. So when your mother said you were troubled, I believed her. I thought I was helping by stepping back. She wiped her eyes with a tissue. 20 years, Alexis. I gave you nothing for 20 years while I gave Derek everything. Money, time, attention, opportunities. And the cruelest part, you actually were fine without me. You built yourself into an incredible woman despite me, despite your parents, despite Derek. You did it alone. She leaned forward, looking directly into the camera. "I'm leaving you everything because it's what I should have given you all along. Not the money, the belief, the support, the love. I can't give you those years back, but I can give you this. And I can make sure that Derek doesn't waste another dollar of family money on his delusions." The video ended. I sat in the darkness of my apartment, crying so hard Mercury jumped off my lap in concern. The second video was labeled for family if needed. I hesitated, then clicked play. This time my grandmother looked stern, sitting up straighter, her voice firm and clear. "If you're watching this, it means you've contested Alexis's inheritance or attempted to pressure her into sharing it. Let me be absolutely clear. This is exactly why I structured the will the way I did." She shuffled some papers on her lap. "Derek, you've been given approximately $400,000 over the years for your various business ventures. Not one has succeeded. Not one has even broken even. I enabled this by continuing to fund you, and I regret that deeply. This ends now. You will receive nothing more from my estate. Learn to build something on your own, or don't, but stop expecting family money to fund your failures." I actually gasped. I'd never heard my grandmother talk like this. "Margaret, Thomas, my parents, you failed Alexis profoundly. You lied about her to me for years. You favored Derek so blatantly that you damaged both your children. Derek never learned self-sufficiency because you never required it. Alexis learned it too well because you never offered her another option. I hope someday you'll reckon with what you've done." She leaned back in her chair. "Alexis earned this inheritance by being exactly who she is, independent, kind, hardworking, and decent. Everything I thought she wasn't, she was. Everything I thought Derek was, he wasn't. I was a foolish old woman who learned the truth too late, but I'm not so foolish that I'd let you take from her what she deserves." The video ended with my grandmother looking directly at the camera one last time. "The will stands. Leave Alexis alone." I copied the file to my computer and saved it in 3 different places. Then I went to bed and slept better than I had in years. My mother showed up at my apartment 2 days later. I found her waiting in the lobby when I got home from work, sitting in one of the leather chairs like she owned the place. She stood when she saw me, and I noticed she dressed carefully, the outfit she wore to important meetings, paired with the pearls my father gave her for their anniversary. "We need to talk," she said. Not hello, not how are you, just the demand. "No, we don't." I moved toward the elevator. She followed me. "Alexis Marie Chen, I am your mother. You will speak to me." I turned to face her, and something in my expression made her take a step back. "You lost the right to make demands when you spent 20 years lying about me to grandmother." Her face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Really? You didn't tell her I was stealing from Derek, that I was lying and acting out. You didn't convince her to cut me off when I was 8 years old." That's not your twisting things," but her voice shook. "Grandmother left me a letter. She told me everything. About your lies, about how she found out the truth, about why she left everything to me and nothing to Derek." I pressed the elevator button. "So no, Mom, we don't need to talk. You need to leave. That money belongs to the family." Her voice rose, echoing in the lobby. The doorman glanced our way. You can't just take it all for yourself. Watch me. You're being selfish after everything we've done for you. I laughed loud enough that she stopped mid-sentence. Everything you've done for me. Like what exactly? Lying about me to my grandmother, giving my college savings to Derek, telling everyone I was difficult and ungrateful when I was actually just trying to survive in a family that didn't want me. That's not fair. We raised you. You fed and clothed me. That's not the same thing as raising me. That's the bare minimum. The elevator arrived and I stepped in. My mother tried to follow, but I held up my hand. If you contact me again about the inheritance, I'll have my lawyer send you a cease and desist. If you keep pushing, I'll make sure everyone you know sees grandmother's video explaining exactly why she left you nothing. Your choice. The doors closed on her shocked face. I made it to my apartment before the shaking started. Mercury met me at the door, meowing for dinner, and I fed her on autopilot before collapsing on the couch. My phone buzzed, a text from my mother. You'll regret this. I blocked her number and then, after a moment's hesitation, blocked Derek and my father too. 28 years of trying to earn their love, their approval, their basic respect. I was done. The lawyer called the next day. Your brother attempted to file a contest of the will this morning. I had him served with your grandmother's video and a letter explaining the terms. He withdrew the contest an hour ago. What did he say? Nothing printable, but he did ask me to tell you he wants to meet. Just to talk, he said. No. I thought you'd say that. I'll relay the message. I hung up and sat at my desk, staring at my computer screen without seeing it. My coworker Jasmine knocked on my door frame. Hey, you okay? You've been really quiet lately. I looked at her. 5 years of working together, hundreds of lunches and happy hours, someone who actually knew me as a person and not just as the disappointing daughter. And I thought, why not? Can you keep a secret? She came in and closed the door. Always. I told her everything. The inheritance, the letters, the videos, my family's reaction. She listened without interrupting, her eyes getting wider. When I finished, she let out a long breath. Holy shit. Yeah. Okay, but here's what I don't get. Why are you still living in this apartment? Why are you still working here? You just inherited $8 million. I blinked. I like my job. I like my job too, but if I had $8 million, I'd at least take some time to figure out what I actually want to do with my life. She leaned forward. Alexis, you spent 28 years living small because your family made you feel like you didn't deserve more. You have a chance now to live big. What do you actually want? I sat with that question for a long moment. What did I want? I want to not be afraid all the time, I said finally. I want to stop apologizing for taking up space. I want to build something that's mine, that my family can't touch or ruin or take credit for. Jasmine grinned. Then do that, whatever that looks like. I spent the next week in a strange fog. I went to work, came home, fed my cat, and sat with Howard Brennan's folders spread across my dining table. Properties, investments, assets. My grandmother had been wealthy in ways I'd never imagined, and she'd left all of it to me. The Vermont property was a cabin on 12 acres of forest. The main property was a cottage right on the ocean. The Connecticut estate was the house I remembered from childhood, sprawling and old and full of rooms I'd been too afraid to explore back when I was still allowed to visit. I called Howard. Can I see the Connecticut house? Of course, it's yours. I'll have the property manager meet you there this weekend. I drove up on Saturday, taking the familiar highway exits that I hadn't used in 2 decades. The house looked exactly the same. Red brick, white columns, gardens that probably cost more to maintain than my annual salary. The property manager, a woman named Ruth who looked to be in her 50s, met me at the door. Ms. Chen, welcome home. Home, the word felt strange. This had never been my home, not really. But I followed her inside and walked through rooms that smelled like lemon polish and old books. The library where my grandmother had filmed her videos. The kitchen where she used to make pancakes on Sunday mornings, back when I was still invited. The bedroom I'd slept in during those brief, magical summers before everything ended. The house has been maintained exactly as your grandmother wished, Ruth said. She left instructions that nothing be changed until you'd had a chance to decide what you wanted to do with it. I walked to the window and looked out at the gardens. Did you know her well? I worked for her for 15 years. She was a remarkable woman, fierce, particular, kind in her own way. Ruth paused. She talked about you near the end. She regretted many things, but I think not knowing you was her biggest regret. I felt tears prick my eyes and blinked them away. Thank you for telling me that. I spent the rest of the day exploring the house alone. It was strange, walking through rooms I'd been banned from, touching things I'd been told not to go near. In my grandmother's bedroom, I found photo albums I'd never seen, pictures of her as a young woman, pictures of my grandfather who died before I was born, pictures of my mother as a child. And pictures of me, dozens of them, all from before age 8. Me in the garden, me with my grandmother at the beach, me reading in the library. Someone had loved me enough to document it. Someone had kept these pictures even after deciding to cut me off. The grief hit me so suddenly I had to sit down on the floor, my back against her bed, crying for the grandmother I'd lost twice, once when I was 8, and again when she died before we could reconcile. My phone rang, an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Is this Alexis Chen? A woman's voice, unfamiliar. Yes. My name is Patricia Morrison. I'm calling about Derek Chen. My stomach dropped. What about him? I'm his former business partner. Well, former victim is more accurate. She laughed, but it was bitter. He owes me $50,000 from a business venture that went south. I heard through mutual friends that you recently inherited money, and I wanted to warn you, he's going to come after you for it. He already has, I said no. Good, don't change your mind. Derek is. He's very good at making you feel like you owe him things, like his failures are somehow your fault for not helping enough. She paused. Can I ask you something? Did he ever actually succeed at anything? No, every business failed, usually within a year. That's what I thought, because the thing is, the business we ran together, it was actually working. We were profitable. And then Derek started making decisions without consulting me, investing in stupid things, buying expensive equipment we didn't need. When I confronted him, he said I was being controlling. 2 months later, we were bankrupt. I closed my eyes. Let me guess, he blamed you for the failure. He told everyone I'd sabotaged the business because I was jealous of his success. Patricia's voice was hard. I lost $50,000 and my reputation. He lost nothing because he never put up any money. It was all mine. I'm sorry that happened to you. I'm not calling for an apology. I'm calling to tell you to protect yourself. Derek doesn't see other people as real. We're just resources for him to use. And now that you have money he thinks should be his, he's going to do everything he can to take it. She hung up before I could respond. I sat in my grandmother's bedroom, surrounded by photos of a life I'd been excluded from, and I made a decision. I wasn't going to just keep the inheritance and move on. I was going to use it exactly how my grandmother would have wanted, to build something real, something lasting, and to make sure my family saw exactly what they'd dismissed for 28 years. The next Monday, I walked into work and submitted my resignation. 2 weeks' notice, professional and clean. My boss was shocked. I'd been there for 5 years, was up for a promotion, had a reputation as someone reliable and steady. Can I ask why? Jennifer sat across from me in her office, looking genuinely concerned. I inherited some money. I want to take time to figure out what I actually want to do with my life. She studied me for a long moment. Is this about whatever's been bothering you the past few weeks? I'd always liked Jennifer. She was fair, direct, and actually cared about her team. So I told her a version of the truth, about the inheritance, about my family's reaction, about needing space to process it all. Your family sounds like assholes, she said when I finished. I laughed, surprised. They really are. Well, you'll be missed here, but I think you're making the right choice. Life's too short to play small when you don't have to. Those last 2 weeks at work felt surreal. I trained my replacement, cleaned out my desk, said goodbye to colleagues who had no idea my entire life had just shifted. Jasmine took me out for drinks on my last day. So what's the plan? She asked, 3 cocktails in. Honestly, I have no idea, but I think that's okay. For the first time in my life, I get to figure it out without anyone telling me I'm doing it wrong. Are you going to tell your family to fuck off? I considered that, not directly, but I'm going to live really well, and they're going to have to watch. Jasmine raised her glass. I'll drink to that. I spent the next month sorting through my grandmother's properties and assets. I sold the Vermont cabin. I wasn't a mountain person. I kept the Maine cottage and the Connecticut estate. I reorganized my investment portfolio with a financial advisor Howard recommended, a sharp woman named Diana who talked to me like an equal, not like someone who'd stumbled into money she didn't deserve. What are your goals? Diana asked in our first meeting. I want to not have to work unless I want to. I want to fund projects I care about. and I want to make sure I never end up dependent on anyone ever again. Conservative investments, sustainable growth, diverse portfolio. I can work with that. She tapped her pen on her notepad. What about family? Anyone you want to set up trusts for, inheritance planning, that kind of thing. No family, I said firmly. Eventually, I'll probably donate most of it, but right now, it's just me. 3 months after my grandmother died, I was sitting in her Connecticut house, my Connecticut house now, working on plans for a project I'd been thinking about for weeks. An environmental research center, funded by my inheritance, focused on coastal conservation, something real and lasting that bore my grandmother's name and my work. My phone rang, Derek's number, but I'd unblocked him a week ago in a moment of curiosity about whether he'd try again. I answered. What do you want, Derek? Jesus, hello to you too. He sounded strained. Look, I'm calling to apologize for how I acted about the will. It was wrong and I'm sorry. I waited. There was always more. The thing is, I'm in a tough spot right now. The business isn't going well and I'm behind on some debts. I was hoping we could talk about a loan, family to family. I'll pay you back, obviously, with interest. I just need a bridge to get through this rough patch. How much? 200,000. I actually laughed. Derek, you've never paid anyone back in your life. Why would you start now? That's not fair. I've had some bad luck with business, but it's not bad luck when it happens every single time. That's just failure. Silence, then his voice changed, getting harder. You know what your problem is, Alexis. You've always been jealous. You couldn't stand that I was the favorite, that I got attention and opportunities, and now that you accidentally fell into money, you think you're better than everyone. I don't think I'm better than everyone, just better than you. Fuck you, you were always a selfish bitch. Grandmother was senile at the end, everyone knows it. She never would have left you everything if she'd been in her right mind. Actually, she was completely lucid when she changed her will 3 years ago, and she did it specifically because she found out Mom lied about me for 20 years. She found out that you're a perpetual failure who wastes every opportunity, and she decided to stop enabling you. That's bullshit. Mom never lied about you. You were a difficult kid. Everyone remembers it. Really, what did I do that was so difficult? You were always causing problems, making Derek look bad. Give me one specific example. He went quiet. I don't have to justify this to you. No, you don't, just like I don't have to give you a single dollar. Lose my number, Derek. I hung up and blocked him again, and this time I meant it permanently. That night I opened my laptop and started a blog. Not under my real name, I wasn't stupid, but I needed to process this somewhere, and therapy only helped so much. I wrote about growing up as the scapegoat child, about family dynamics that destroy one kid to elevate another, about what it felt like to be vindicated 2 decades too late. The post went viral within a week. Thousands of comments from people who'd lived similar experiences, who'd been the black sheep or the forgotten child or the one blamed for everything. Reading their stories made me feel less alone and more angry. How many families did this? How many kids grew up thinking they were fundamentally flawed because the people who were supposed to love them needed a scapegoat? I wrote more posts about inheritance and family expectations, about going no contact with toxic parents, about building a life that made you proud instead of one that made your family happy. The blog grew. Within 3 months, I had 50,000 followers. Within 6 months, a literary agent reached out asking if I'd ever considered writing a book. I took a meeting with her, Simone Chen, no relation, which we both found funny. She was sharp and direct and saw the potential immediately. The story isn't just about the inheritance, she said over coffee in Manhattan. It's about reclaiming your narrative, taking back the story of who you are from people who lied about you. That's powerful. It's also personal. My family would lose their minds if they knew I was writing about this. So don't use real names, change identifying details, but the emotional truth, that's what resonates. That's what will help other people who lived through similar things. I thought about it for exactly 2 minutes. Let's do it. Writing the book was harder than I expected, not the actual writing, that flowed easily once I started, but reliving all those memories, all those moments of rejection and dismissal and casual cruelty took a toll. I started seeing a therapist, a woman named Dr. Sarah Kim who specialized in family trauma. You're grieving, she told me in our 3rd session, not just for your grandmother, but for the childhood you deserved and didn't get, for the family you should have had. I'm 28 years old. Shouldn't I be over it by now? Trauma doesn't have a statute of limitations, and what you experienced was trauma, emotional neglect, scapegoating, being gaslit about your own experiences and worth. She leaned forward. Give yourself permission to be angry about it. I sat with that, permission to be angry. I'd spent my whole life swallowing anger, pushing it down, being the reasonable one, the one who didn't make waves. What would it feel like to just be angry? I found out a week later when my father showed up at the Connecticut house. I was in the garden planning where to put the research center's greenhouses when I heard a car in the driveway. Ruth was off for the day, so I walked around to the front, expecting a delivery. Instead, I found my father getting out of his Mercedes, looking older than I remembered. We hadn't seen each other in almost 2 years, not since the family dinner where he'd asked me to cash in a loan for Derek, and I'd said no. Alexis, he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Beautiful place. I haven't been here since Mother's funeral. You should leave. I just want to talk. Can a father talk to his daughter? You lost the right to call yourself my father a long time ago. Get off my property. He held up his hands. I know you're angry. You have a right to be, but we're still family, and I think if we just sit down and talk. About what? About how you and Mom systematically destroyed my relationship with grandmother by lying about me for 20 years. About how you gave Derek every advantage while making me work for scraps. About how you're only here now because you want money. He flinched. That's not entirely fair. Isn't it? I stepped closer, and I felt something shift in me. All that anger Dr. Kim had given me permission to feel. It was right there, ready. Did you or did you not tell grandmother I was stealing from Derek when I was 8? Your mother may have exaggerated some behavioral issues you were having. I was 8. I didn't have behavioral issues. I had a family that needed me to be the problem so Derek could be the solution. You're twisting things. We did our best with both of you. It's not our fault that Derek needed more support. He didn't need more support. He needed consequences. And he never got them because you two were so busy making excuses for him that you never noticed you had another kid who needed you. My father's face hardened. We clothed you, fed you, sent you to good schools. The bare minimum? Congratulations. I crossed my arms. You want to know what's really not fair? I spent 28 years trying to earn your approval, working harder, achieving more, being less trouble, needing less support. And none of it mattered because you'd already decided I was the expendable one. That's not true. Then name one thing I accomplished that you celebrated. 1. My scholarship to Columbia. You said I was lucky they needed diversity admits. My job at the environmental consulting firm. You asked when I'd get a real career. My master's degree. You didn't even come to graduation. He went quiet, and I knew I'd hit truths. You're here for money, I said flatly. So let's skip the pretense. How much do you want, and what sob story did you prepare to justify it? Your mother and I are facing some financial difficulties. The market hasn't been good, and some investments went bad. Derek's investments. You gave him your retirement savings for that cryptocurrency scheme, didn't you? He looked away. He was very convincing about the potential returns. He's always very convincing. That's what con artists are good at. I turned toward the house. The answer is no. No money, no loans, no investments in whatever Derek is selling now. You made your choices. Live with them. Alexis, please, we're your parents. I looked back at him and I felt nothing. No anger anymore, no sadness, no guilt, just nothing. You were DNA contributors who happened to raise me. That's all you've ever been. I pulled out my phone. You have 2 minutes to get off my property before I call the police for trespassing. He stared at me like he'd never seen me before. Maybe he hadn't. Maybe the Alexis he knew was the one who always bent, always compromised, always tried to keep the peace. That Alexis was gone. He left. I watched his car disappear down the long driveway, and then I went inside and called Howard Brennan. I need to add my parents and brother to a no trespass list for all my properties. Can you handle that? Absolutely. I'll have the paperwork drawn up today. I hung up and stood in my grandmother's library, my library now, and felt something settle in my chest. This was my life now, my house, my money, my choices, and they couldn't touch any of it. The book came together over the next 6 months. Simone was right. Once I focused on the emotional truth instead of the specific details, the story became universal. It wasn't just about my family. It was about every family that picks favorites, that scapegoats one child to elevate another, that confuses control with love. We changed all the names. My family became the Ashfords. The inheritance became smaller, 2 million instead of 8, enough to be meaningful but not so specific that it pinpointed me. Derek became Nathan, my parents became Richard and Claire, but the emotional beat stayed true. The book sold in a 3-publisher auction. My advance was 6 figures. Simone called me, laughing with delight, and said, "You did it, you actually did it." "We haven't published yet." "No, but you will, and people are going to see themselves in this story. You're going to help a lot of people." The book came out in October, exactly 1 year after my grandmother's death. It was called The Expendable Daughter, Breaking Free from Family Scapegoating. My author name was A.E. Morrison, my initials plus my college roommate's last name. The reviews were incredible, searing, honest, a necessary look at toxic family dynamics, will resonate with anyone who's ever been the black sheep. It hit the New York Times bestseller list in the 2nd week. My mother called 3 weeks after publication. I'd unblocked her number months ago, curious if she'd figure it out. She had. "Did you write a book about us?" Her voice was shaking. "I don't know what you means." "Don't play games with me, Alexis. The expendable daughter, the family dynamics, the inheritance, the grandmother who changes her will, it's all there. Lots of families have those dynamics, Mom. That's why the book is resonating with so many people. You used our story, our private family business. How could you?" I almost laughed. I used my story, my experience of being scapegoated and lied about and dismissed for 28 years. That's not your story to control. "We could sue you for this." "You could try, but I changed all the identifying details, and defamation requires proving I lied. Can you prove that any of the emotional truth in that book is false? Can you prove you didn't lie to grandmother about me? Can you prove you didn't favor Derek to the point of destroying both your children?" Silence on the other end. I didn't think so. I kept my voice calm, almost pleasant. "The book isn't about revenge, Mom. It's about healing. But if you want to sue me and make it a public case where all those private family business details come out under oath, go right ahead. I have grandmother's letters, her videos, and 28 years of therapy notes documenting the damage. Do you really want that in court?" "You're vindictive, cruel. I don't know what happened to the sweet girl you used to be." "That girl learned that being sweet just meant being easy to hurt. I like who I am now better." She hung up without saying goodbye. The book kept selling. By December, it had sold 200,000 copies. The blog following grew to 300,000 people. I started getting interview requests from podcasts, from magazines, from local news stations. I turned most of them down. I didn't want to be famous, and I didn't want my real identity connected to the book. But I did a few phone interviews, always keeping my voice disguised, my details vague. The research center broke ground in January. I hired a team of actual environmental scientists, people who knew what they were doing, and I funded it generously enough that they could do real work without constantly scrambling for grants. I named it the Eleanor Morrison Research Center, my grandmother's name, but Morrison instead of her real surname. Close enough to honor her, distant enough to maintain my privacy. The dedication ceremony was small. Just the research team, Ruth, Howard, Diana, my financial advisor, and Simone. No family because I didn't have family anymore. Not in the traditional sense. But I had Ruth, who'd known my grandmother and helped me feel connected to her. I had Howard, who'd protected my interests and become something like a friend. I had Diana, who managed my money and treated me with respect. I had Simone, who'd believed in my story and helped me tell it. And I had the research team, brilliant people doing work they loved because I'd given them the resources to do it. That felt like family, the kind you choose, the kind that chose you back. I was standing in the research center's new library, looking at the plaque with my grandmother's name, when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Derek. I know you wrote that book. I know the research center is yours. I know you're living in grandmother's house and using our inheritance to fund your little revenge fantasy. You think you're better than us now, but you're not. You're just a bitter woman who can't let go of the past. Mom and Dad are devastated. You've destroyed this family." I read it twice, then typed back. "You destroyed this family decades ago. I just stopped pretending otherwise. Lose this number." I blocked him again and put my phone away. Jasmine flew in from New York for the dedication. We had dinner at a restaurant overlooking the ocean, drinking expensive wine and laughing about how much had changed in a year. "So what's next?" she asked. "You've got the research center, the book is a bestseller, you're set financially for life. What does Alexis Chen do for an encore?" I thought about it. I think I just live, not for anyone else, not to prove anything, just live. "That's disappointingly boring." Is it though? I swirled my wine. I spent 28 years living for other people's approval. Living for myself is actually the most radical thing I can do. She raised her glass to living radically boring lives. To living exactly how we want. We clinked glasses and I meant it. This was enough. The house, the research center, the book, the peace of mind that came from finally being free. I didn't need my family's approval or their apologies or their understanding. I needed exactly what I had, my own life, built on my own terms, funded by a grandmother who'd finally seen the truth. The hate mail started around the same time. The book hit 1 million copies sold. Anonymous emails telling me I was a terrible daughter, that I should be grateful my parents raised me at all, that I was greedy and selfish for keeping an inheritance that should have been shared with family. I deleted them without reading past the first line. The support mail vastly outnumbered the hate. Thousands of messages from other scapegoat children, other black sheep, other people who'd been told their whole lives they were the problem. They thanked me for writing their story. They said the book helped them see their family dynamics clearly for the first time. They said it gave them permission to walk away. Those messages I saved. I created a folder and kept every single one, and on hard days when I questioned whether I'd done the right thing, I read them and remembered why I'd written the book in the first place. Dr. Kim asked me in therapy if I felt guilty about the book. No, I said, surprising myself with how certain I sounded. I felt guilty about everything for 28 years. I'm done with guilt that isn't mine to carry. That's growth, she said, and she looked genuinely proud. The first anniversary of my grandmother's death fell on a cold October day. I drove to the cemetery alone, carrying flowers I'd grown in her garden. The headstone was simple, Eleanor Morrison, beloved mother and grandmother with her dates and nothing else. I'd offered to add more, but Howard said she'd specified she wanted it simple. I sat on the grass next to her grave and talked to her like she was still alive. I don't know if you can hear me, I said. I don't know if I believe in that, but if you can, thank you for seeing the truth, for trying to make it right, for giving me the resources to build something real. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves on the nearby trees. The research center opened last month. It's doing good work, real science, real conservation efforts. Your name is on it, and I think you'd be proud of what they're accomplishing. I placed the flowers at the base of the headstone. The book is doing well too, 1 million copies so far. Mom figured out it was me and called to yell about it, but I don't think she'll actually sue. She'd have to admit too much truth. A bird landed on the headstone, looked at me, then flew away. I'm okay, Grandma. Better than okay, actually. I'm happy. And I know you said the money wasn't an apology, but I want you to know, I forgive you anyway. You were the only one who actually tried to make things right. I sat there for another hour, just being quiet, before I drove back to the house. That night I started writing again. Not a book this time, just journal entries, documenting this strange, surreal year of my life. Maybe someday it would become something. Maybe it would just stay private. Either way, it helped to get it out. 2 years after the inheritance, I was living full-time in Connecticut. I kept my apartment in the city but rarely stayed there. The house felt like home now. I'd made changes, updated rooms, filled it with my own books and art and the things that made me happy. Mercury loved it, spending her days prowling the gardens and her nights curled up on my grandmother's, my favorite chair in the library. The research center was thriving. We'd published 3 major papers on coastal ecosystem preservation. We'd secured additional grants beyond my funding. We were making a real difference, and I got to watch it happen. The book had sold 2 million copies and been translated into 15 languages. Simone called regularly with updates about film rights, about speaking tour requests, about opportunities I kept turning down because I valued my privacy more than I valued fame. I dated occasionally, but nothing serious. I was still learning how to be in relationships when you've spent your whole life believing you were fundamentally unlovable. Dr. Kim said that was normal, that it took time to unlearn those patterns. In my family, I hadn't spoken to any of them in 18 months. I'd heard through the grapevine, Ruth's sister knew someone who knew my mother, that Derek had declared bankruptcy, that my parents had downsized to a smaller house, that my mother told people I'd stolen the inheritance through manipulation and elder abuse. I felt nothing when I heard these things, not satisfaction, not guilt, not sadness, just nothing. They were strangers who happened to share my DNA. Their lives and choices had nothing to do with me anymore. I was in the garden one afternoon in late spring, working on the vegetable beds I'd planted, when Ruth came out to find me. "There's someone at the door for you," she said. "She says she's your cousin." I frowned. I had cousins on my mother's side, but we'd never been close. I couldn't imagine why one of them would show up unannounced. I cleaned the dirt off my hands and went to the front door. A woman about my age stood there, dark hair pulled back, nervous energy radiating off her. "Alexis, I'm Sophie, Sophie Chen, your cousin through your dad's side." I vaguely remembered her. We'd met a few times at family gatherings when we were kids. "What are you doing here?" "I read your book," she said it fast like she'd been practicing. "I mean, I didn't know it was you at first, but then your mom was complaining about it at a family dinner, and she said enough details that I figured it out. And I had to tell you that I'm sorry." I blinked. Sorry for what? For being part of it, for watching them treat you like that and never saying anything, for believing their version of you instead of getting to know you myself. She twisted her hands together. I was the scapegoat in my family too. My brother was the golden child, and I was the disappointment, so I should have recognized what was happening to you, and I didn't. I'm sorry. I stood there, not sure what to say. Finally, "Do you want to come in?" We sat in the library and talked for 3 hours. Sophie told me about her own family dynamics, her own experience of being the expendable daughter. She'd gone no contact with her parents 5 years ago and hadn't spoken to most of the extended family since. "But I saw what you did," she said, "with the book, with the research center, with just building a whole life that has nothing to do with them, and I thought if she can do it, maybe I can too." "You already did it," I pointed out. "You went no contact 5 years ago." "Yeah, but I still felt guilty about it, like I was the bad guy for walking away. Your book helped me see that protecting yourself isn't the same as being cruel." We exchanged numbers before she left. Over the next few months, we started having regular calls, then visits. She became something like family, the kind that was real, built on honesty and mutual respect instead of obligation. Through Sophie, I learned that several other family members had figured out I wrote the book. Some were angry, some were defensive, but a few, 3 other cousins and an aunt, had reached out to Sophie saying they'd had similar experiences in their own families. "I think we should have dinner," Sophie said one day. "All of us, the black sheep and scapegoats and expendable daughters, we can start our own family tradition." We did. Once a month, we met at various locations, sometimes my house, sometimes Sophie's apartment in Boston, sometimes restaurants. We called ourselves the Spare Parts Club, and we talked about our families, our healing, our lives. It was cathartic and painful and necessary. At one of these dinners, my Aunt Linda, my father's sister, who I'd barely known growing up, asked me what I was going to do with the rest of the inheritance. "I've been thinking about setting up a foundation," I said, "for scapegoated children. Therapy funds, college scholarships, emergency housing for people who need to leave toxic families, something permanent." Linda's eyes filled with tears. "That would have changed my life when I was younger." "Mine too," I said. "That's why I want to do it." The Eleanor Morrison Foundation launched 3 years after her death. It was everything I'd imagined, a real resource for people escaping toxic family dynamics. We funded therapy, education, housing deposits, legal fees for people seeking restraining orders or contesting unfair wills. We gave people the tools to build lives outside their family's control. The first year, we helped 200 people. The second year, 500. By the 5th year, we were operating in 12 states and had helped over 2,000 people. I ran it from Connecticut with a small staff and a lot of careful planning. The work was hard and often heartbreaking. Every application reminded me of my own story, my own struggle, but it was also deeply meaningful. I was using my grandmother's money exactly as she would have wanted, to help people build better lives. My mother made one last attempt to contact me 4 years after the inheritance. She sent a letter to the foundation's public address, probably thinking I wouldn't see it personally. Ruth brought it to me one afternoon, recognizing the return address. I almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity won. The letter was short. "Alexis, I'm writing because your father is very sick, stage 4 cancer. The doctors say he has 6 months, maybe less. He wants to see you before he dies. He wants to make peace. I know you're angry with us. I know you think we failed you, but he's your father and he's dying. Please don't let him die with this between you." "Mom." I read it twice, waiting for the guilt to hit, the obligation, the sense that I should go, should forgive, should give him peace before he died. Nothing came, just that same neutral emptiness I'd felt for years when I thought about my parents. I wrote back, "Mom, I'm sorry Dad is sick. That must be very difficult for you and Derek. I won't be visiting. Dad had 28 years to make peace with me and chose not to. I don't owe him absolution on his deathbed just because he's finally facing consequences he can't escape. If he genuinely wants to make amends, he can write me a letter taking actual responsibility for his actions. Not excuses, not justifications, actual acknowledgement of harm and regret. If he does that, I'll read it. But I won't pretend we're a loving family for his comfort. That ship sailed a long time ago. Alexis. I never got that letter. My father died 3 months later. Sophie called to tell me she'd heard through the family grapevine. Are you going to the funeral? She asked. No, are you? God, no, I haven't been to a family event in 6 years, not starting now. I felt nothing when my father died. No relief, no sadness, no closure, just acknowledgement that a person I used to know was gone. My mother tried calling after the funeral. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail saying I was heartless and cruel, that I'd regret not saying goodbye, that she hoped I could live with myself. I deleted it and went back to work. 5 years after my grandmother died, the research center won a major award for environmental conservation work. National recognition, a ceremony in D.C., press coverage. I attended with the research team, stayed in the background, let them have the spotlight. This was their achievement, funded by my resources but built by their expertise. At the reception afterward, a journalist approached me. You're A.E. Morrison, aren't you, the author of The Expendable Daughter? I considered lying but decided I was done hiding. Yes. I thought so. I recognized you from the author photo, even though you tried to disguise it. She smiled. Your grandmother would be proud of all this. The book, the foundation, the research center. You turned your inheritance into something that actually matters. That was always the plan. Can I ask, do you have any contact with your family now? No, and I don't plan to. No regrets. I thought about it honestly. No regrets about the distance, some sadness about what could have been if they'd been different people, but no, I don't regret protecting myself. She nodded like she understood. Thank you for being honest. The article came out a week later, connecting me publicly to the book for the first time. My inbox exploded with interview requests, speaking invitations, people wanting my story. I ignored most of them, but I did agree to one long-form interview with a journalist who'd written extensively about family trauma. We talked for 6 hours, about the inheritance, the book, the foundation, the research center, about what it meant to walk away from family and build something new, about whether blood really mattered when it came without love. The piece ran in a major magazine with my face on the cover, The Expendable Daughter, How Alexis Chen Turned Family Rejection into Purpose. My mother called the day it published. I answered, curious what she'd say. You've made us a laughingstock, were her first words. Everyone we know has seen that article. Everyone knows you wrote that book about us. I wrote that book about my experience. If you're embarrassed by it, maybe examine why you're embarrassed by the truth. It's not the truth. You've twisted everything to make us look bad while you look like some kind of hero. I'm not a hero, Mom. I'm just someone who stopped accepting your version of reality. Derek is devastated. This attention on the family has ruined his chance at starting a new business. Investors won't touch him now. I almost laughed. Derek's ruined every business he's touched for 30 years. That has nothing to do with me or my book. You used to be such a sweet girl. I don't know what happened to you. I grew up, I stopped confusing doormat behavior with kindness, and I learned that the people who call you sweet usually just mean you're easy to manipulate. She hung up without responding. That was the last time we spoke. She died 2 years later, a sudden heart attack. Sophie called to tell me, asking if I wanted to go to the funeral. No, I said. I said goodbye to her a long time ago. Fair enough, I'll send flowers on your behalf so people don't talk. You don't have to do that. I want to. The Spare Parts Club takes care of each other. After my mother died, I waited for grief that never came. Just relief that she couldn't hurt me anymore, couldn't make demands or level accusations or try to guilt me into submission. Dr. Kim said that was normal. You grieved the mother you should have had years ago. This woman who died, you'd already let her go. Derek tried one more time after her death. He sent a letter to the foundation. Alexis. Mom is gone, Dad is gone. It's just us now. Don't you think it's time to let go of this grudge? We're the only family each other has left. I know I wasn't a great brother. I know I benefited from their favoritism, but we were both just kids doing what we were taught. Can't we move past it? I'm not asking for money. I'm asking for a relationship, for a chance to know my sister. Derek. I read it carefully, looking for manipulation or hidden requests. It seemed genuine, which surprised me. I wrote back, Derek, I appreciate that this seems sincere, but the truth is, we don't have a relationship to salvage. We never did. You were a stranger who happened to live in the same house as me, and you treated me accordingly. I've built a good life with people who actually care about me. I don't have space in it for someone who spent 28 years treating me as expendable. I hope you build a good life too, but build it without me. Alexis. He didn't write again. 10 years after my grandmother died, I was 40 years old and completely content with my life. The research center was internationally recognized. The foundation had helped over 10,000 people. The book was taught in psychology courses about family dynamics. I'd written 2 more books, one about healing from family trauma, one about building chosen family. I lived in Connecticut with 2 cats, a partner I'd met through the foundation's work who understood family trauma from personal experience, and a circle of friends who felt more like family than my blood relations ever had. The Spare Parts Club still met monthly. We'd added new members over the years, other relatives, friends of relatives, people who'd heard about us and needed community. We celebrated each other's successes, supported each other through hard times, and proved that family was about choice, not genetics. On the 10th anniversary of inheriting, I held a small ceremony at my grandmother's grave. Just me, my partner Marcus, Sophie, and a few foundation staff members who'd become close friends. I placed flowers on the headstone and spoke to the stone like I had so many times before. Thank you, Grandma, for seeing the truth, for giving me the tools to build this life, for being braver than my parents and choosing love over lies. Marcus squeezed my hand. She'd be proud of you. I hope so. I'm proud of me, which is something I never thought I'd be able to say. We stood there for a while in comfortable silence, and then we went back to the house, my house, full of my chosen family, full of laughter and warmth and the kind of love that didn't come with conditions. That night, I opened my journal and wrote, 10 years ago, I inherited $8.4 million and thought it was about money. It wasn't. It was about permission. Permission to stop being small, stop apologizing for existing, stop trying to earn love from people who were never going to give it. The money helped. It gave me security and opportunity and the ability to help others. But the real inheritance was the message underneath it all. You deserve to be loved. You deserve to take up space. You deserve to be seen. My family tried to make me believe I was cursed, unlucky, a burden. They failed. Not because I proved them wrong, but because I stopped trying to. I built a life they couldn't touch, filled with people who chose me and who I chose back. That's the real revenge. Not hurting them back, not exposing them, though the book did that anyway, but living so well, so fully, so joyfully that their opinions stopped mattering entirely. I spent 28 years as the expendable daughter. I've spent the last 10 years becoming the irreplaceable architect of my own life. And I wouldn't change a single thing. I closed the journal and went downstairs, where Marcus was making dinner and Sophie was setting the table and my cats were weaving between everyone's legs hoping for scraps. This was family. This was home. This was everything I'd built from the ashes of what I'd lost. And it was more than enough.